Most people's first experience of Caelid was probably being taken there against their will. When you enter this cave in Argyll Lake and open this chest, you spawn in the Cellia crystal tunnels, and after getting one-shot a bunch by pest threads while you try to make your escape, you finally make it out to see the horror of Caelid for the first time. My experience, however, was a little different. Whilst wandering around, I came across this church. I couldn't help feeling like there was something really off about this place. Something felt weird. The relaxing ambience of Limgrave's soundtrack had turned into ominous dissonance, and the beautiful sky had turned blood red. My curiosity took me from the smouldering church to the smouldering wall, where I got my first glimpse of Caelid. The music and the obvious change in world and enemy design make sure that you know instinctively that you're in far more danger here. No on-screen pop-up warning that you've entered a high-level area. No red skull above the enemy denoting their superior power. Just a massive bird sitting on the branch, paying no attention to you at all. I've always loved this. They could have had it aggro, fly over and one-shot you the moment that you step foot in here. But this is almost a more terrifying warning. You're left standing there, wondering if this is a fight you actually want to have. If this is really where you want to go at this point. I think this was the first sign of something that I wasn't, if I'm honest, expecting of Elden Ring prior to its release. Was I expecting 10 out of 10 bosses from Elden Ring? Yes. Was I expecting 10 out of 10 legacy dungeons? Of course. But did I expect that it would be the open world that would be the most notable thing about the whole experience? To feel like it's the natural evolution of FromSoftware's Dark Souls vision. To feel like it's where they've been heading all along. Not really. I expected Elden Ring to tick the boxes of an open world game, but that the true magic would still lie where it always has, in dungeon exploration, interconnected level design, and the boss fights. While the open world padded out the game with some extra exploration along the way. The world would be cool enough, but not spectacular. What we got though, is to this day the most incredible, most immersive, and most memorable open world that I've ever explored. And the reason that I'm talking about this is that I think we're about to get something even more special. One of the most exciting things to me about the release of Shadow of the Erdtree's gameplay trailer was something that Miyazaki said in his interview with Eurogamer, when he talked about the general change in design philosophy of Shadow of the Erdtree's world. The content of his statement here is exciting enough, but what really struck me whilst reading it was the realization that we are about to see FromSoftware's second attempt at designing an open world. And what makes that so exciting is just how good their first attempt was. So rather than going through all the details like all the good YouTubers have, I wanted to talk a bit about what made me love these games, why Elden Ring is so special, and why I'm so excited for Shadow of the Erdtree. I want to start here, back in the first FromSoftware game I played. On my first playthrough of Bloodborne, I discovered something that I wasn't meant to. While I was exploring Cathedral Ward, in an area unlocked after defeating the third boss of the game, I found this strange room with beams and platforms. And while this was clearly not the main route forward, I thought I'd see if I could make it down here. At first glance, this looked like a dead end, aside from a few items you can grab. But at the bottom, I could see a door that I couldn't reach. After many deaths, I found that if you roll into these ropes from the top beam, you can drop down onto this ledge and reach that door. And through it, I found a secret area, a real version of the hunter's dream. You even get a trophy for finding it. There's a doll's outfit you can sell for loads of cash here, and an odd item by this one weird grave on its own right next to the building. I wonder whose grave this is. I wonder why this item is next to it. Why is it so close to the building? It's probably not important. As I left to continue down, I knew instinctively what was happening here. This little platforming section was not meant to be discovered on your first playthrough. This was a secret meant for nerds who'd played the game a few times. In my childish determination to make it down here despite the wonky feeling platforming and the lack of a dedicated jump button, I was circumventing the intended route through this area and creating my own secret one. This suspicion was confirmed to me when I reached the bottom and found this beast facing the door. Ha! This idiot is waiting for me to walk through that door, but he didn't plan on me finding this secret route down. This little area led me to a helpful shortcut and I continued with the game. And an embarrassing amount of hours later, when I actually finished it, something was bugging me. What was the intended route down to that area? How were you actually meant to get there? It was one of the first things that I looked up when I'd finished my first playthrough, because despite, I think, exploring the whole of Yharnam, I'd never actually found it. It turns out, there isn't one. There's an item you can buy that allows you to skip that area entirely, but if you don't notice it, or don't want to spend loads of blood echoes very early on in the game, this is the intended route of the main story. I hadn't discovered a secret, I was doing exactly what everyone else did, but it didn't feel like that. This is the first example I can think of what made me fall in love with FromSoftware games. Their ability to make you feel like you're the only person in the world who's playing them that way. The magic of FromSoftware to me is how deeply personal they are to experience. There are so many games sitting in my PlayStation and Steam libraries that I know I really enjoyed playing. But if you ask me about lots of the details that happened in them, I think I'd struggle to remember. But ask me what build and equipment I used to beat any of the Souls games for the first time many years ago, and that information is stored in my brain right next to my name and address. The Souls games have always felt like they're made to make each journey as variable as possible, with most of them constantly giving you choices in how or in what order to do things. But because of their relatively linear nature, none of them ever did that to the extent that Elden Ring does. Elden Ring feels like the culmination of all FromSoftware's efforts to make their games the most unique and personal experiences possible. I remember a non-Souls player friend of mine messaging me about his build on his first playthrough of the game a couple of months after release. He'd fought a boss in an Everjail in Limgrave and found a sword called Bloodhound's Fang, and he was excitedly telling me how it shredded bosses. At that time, there was a new video on Bloodhound's Fang dropping every hour on YouTube. It was being tested for speedruns, and I guarantee you that a not insignificant percentage of you watching this video used it as your main weapon on your first playthrough too. But to my buddy, it was his. He found it, and that was his build. Like me jumping down those rafters in Yharnam years earlier, he'd found a secret. Elden Ring's world creates the perfect canvas for experimentation, with the more dangerous bosses nudging you towards tombs, caves and catacombs to power up more to defeat them. The more desperate you get though, the more likely you are to stumble on something memorable. The first glimpse of Liurnia is one of the most breathtaking reveals in the game. Most people will have experienced this after beating Godric, but some will have got there early, whilst trying to fully explore Limgrave in the hopes of beating Margit. I spoke earlier about 2 of the ways you might find yourself in Caelid, but maybe you took this teleporter behind the third church instead. Maybe you went in to speak to this strange character, or maybe you started a fight with this guy, the strongest gargoyle in the game. Yeah, they put the most powerful one in the game right next to a spawn point that you often discover a couple of hours in. God, I love FromSoftware. Maybe you did a one-way supermarket sweep through Caelid grabbing items, hoping for a cool weapon or something, and got jump scared by this dragon who at first glance just looks like a boulder. Or maybe the dragons didn't scare you until you came face to face with the largest living one FromSoftware have ever put in a game. Apparently you can kill that thing with the Morning Star and some bleed grease, but I've never tried it. In so many open worlds, you're aware that you could be anywhere, that you could be exploring anything. But most of the time you're not. You're doing some quest line, following some slow-walking NPC, feeling like you're exactly where you're supposed to be, where the developers want you to be, being presented the game the way you're supposed to see it. Elden Ring flips that on its head. On a first playthrough, you almost never feel like you're where you're supposed to be. You're not even sure if there is somewhere you're supposed to be half of the time. You're just exploring a world which is constantly moving and reforming around you based on where you go and what you find. Finding that item that you're looking for may propel you back towards the main quest. Not finding it may lead you further and further off the beaten track. The item that you pick up on the main quest was what that nutty NPC was on about 3 hours ago, so back to them and away from the main story you go. An interesting revelation about Shadow of the Erdtree was the introduction of a new power leveling system similar to Sekiro's, allowing for a more balanced experience of the DLC. Now, the build guide maker part of my brain wonders if this will mean that rune levels will be far less important in Shadow of the Erdtree. Can we do early Moog, do the DLC as an alternative to the main story, just so we can go back and do the base game as an overpowered porcupine hippo build? I kinda hope so. But I suspect this system is more tailored towards nerfing level 300 builds than making the expansion any more accessible to low level ones. The slightly less juvenile side of me wonders what this will do to exploration in the Land of Shadow. Will killing bosses be the only source of power levels? Or can rare power-ups be obtained by exploration, pushing us to seek out every crevice of the map? Will every boss give the same amount of power levels, incentivizing finding the weakest ones first, as a means of standing your ground against the more formidable? Or will bigger bosses give you more levels, possibly incentivizing beelining a manageable one for an early power-up? We don't know the answers to any of these questions, but I think any answer will make for very interesting exploration. I started this video talking about the one thing for which I had relatively low expectations of Elden Ring: the open world. And it's quite fitting that it's now the thing that I might actually be the most excited for in Shadow of the Erdtree. Will the bosses be incredible? Of course they will. It's a FromSoftware DLC. They'll be mind-bendingly good. Will the music be good? Of course it will. They've given us a snippet of one track and it's been in my head on repeat for 10 days. Will the legacy dungeons be astonishing? Of course they will. Old Hunters, the Ring City, they'll be incredible. But what I so cannot wait for is being back in a FromSoftware open world, with no idea what to do or where to go. Trying to get to grips with the scale of a world as it constantly expands around me. And knowing me, I'll probably fall down some beams and rafters on the way. Thanks for watching.